It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Grind Line here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by my defense partner, Devin Little. We're back to a defense pairing after our big team. They all had an exodus, but we're back. So here we go for a post-draft, pre-free agency edition. As you're watching this, or if you're watching it right when it comes out, it's like 3 hours before free agency. Slips of the tongue. Free agency, not trade deadline. That's a while off. Free agency's coming, and lots of stuff probably going to happen right when the bell rings at noon Eastern. But as you're watching this, hopefully you're watching this before any of the free agent stuff happens. So this is not dated, but we do have the draft recap. We'll start there, talking about the draft picks that the Red Wings selected at the 2023 draft, and some notable names and some interesting names in the later rounds. We'll talk about that. But first, Devin, how's it going? And give us a one good, one bad of this last draft week.
I'm doing good. Like we were saying off camera, been kind of crawling through a burning house here in the Midwest with our air quality. Happy that seems like the worst has passed with that. My one good is going to be keeping their 2 first-round picks and getting 2 really good prospects. We'll talk about them more specifically here shortly. But coming out of the first round with 2 prospects, especially those 2 specific ones, those are a big boost to the prospect pool, and both players very much project to be NHL players down the line here. So good on them. My one bad is going to be, I guess, just the overall lack of trades, right? A lot of talk of that stuff, not just for the Red Wings too, like it seems like everybody except for the Blackhawks that acquired Corey Perry and Taylor Hall and whatever and whatnot. Just no deals. What the heck? Everybody's kind of gun shy. Red Wings made one deal to trade back and pick up an extra pick as if they didn't have enough already. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm sure that there's more noise to come on that end, but half of the excitement of draft day is the crazy deals that went down, and none did this year. So slight disappointment on that end.
Yeah, I'll echo that as my bad. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick didn't know what to do with themselves down on the draft floor. Though. They were interviewing prospects, talking about prospects. Like, man, you're out of your element, guys. No trades, and there was talk of them. I mean, it's not like there wasn't. It just seemed teams weren't given the right offers to get things done. I mean, and I did say this a few times during the year that these picks are going to be hard to move, and it seemed to be. They were moved, obviously, before the draft on a few times, but on the draft floor, it seemed like that would need to be a bigger deal for them to move it, and a lot of the teams didn't want to. And Colorado Avalanche did acquire another one, but this before the draft, so it wasn't on the draft floor at all. But yeah, no trades. So that was a disappointing thing. I mean, the draft is exciting. I mean, a lot of of course, where guys went, where Michkov went, where all that stuff, it was interesting to see. But yeah, no drama with the trades or anyone moving up, which is part of the excitement of it, right? So good. Is just the prospects getting drafted. I mean, I love seeing the kids getting their jerseys, and especially later in the rounds on second day with I can't remember his name, who got drafted, the final draft pick of the Nashville Predators, David Poile, Aiden Fink.
Absolutely.
Aiden Fink. And that's awesome, because I wanted Aiden Fink to get drafted. It's like, why is he dropping and why is he not getting drafted? So the Nashville Predators end up drafting him, and David Poile's last draft pick in his long tenure in the NHL. That's going to be a trivia question, I think, down the line. And 82 will be the
For
answer.
sure.
But yeah, it was an exciting day, and just so much anticipation. It's like Christmas. There's so much preparation and all that stuff, and it's just gone. It's done in one day or a couple days, and all that work and all that stuff is over pretty quick. So I'll add that to my bad too, because it's done really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we're not done talking about it. Obviously, let's talk about the Red Wings draft picks in the 2023 draft, and starting in the first round, and with Nate Danielson, and he was drafted 9th overall. And there were some other guys on the board at the time. Oliver Moore was there, and we talked about him as a target. Went with Nate Danielson. Devin, what do you think about that 9th overall pick going to Danielson?
The Nate Danielson pick honestly reminds me a lot of the Marco Kasper pick from last year, for a couple of reasons. One, I think he went a little higher than I would have liked to have seen him go. I would have said the exact same thing about Kasper last year. Second, he's like Danielson's very much a high effort, two-way, maybe underrated skill centerman. That is a way to describe Kasper as well, right? Kind of a pain in the neck to play against. And then also, I don't know, it just, I guess the overall sentiment I had is that I already kind of feel like they left some upside on the board. There were some other guys available that I know I would have taken over Danielson if I was in charge, but maybe that's the reason why I'm not in charge, right? But I don't know. The Kasper thing, it felt like they left upside on the board then. Danielson, same thing. Now, that being said, a year, here we are a year from last year's draft, and I like Kasper a lot more than I did back then. And I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now I'm singing the exact same tune about Danielson. The quote that Chris Draper said after the first round, it's a kind of Bedard quote, actually. But he talked about how Bedard said that Danielson was one of the toughest players for him to play against in the WHL last year. And that's a pretty glowing endorsement, right? And I think that kind of speaks to what the Red Wings are trying to do. If they aren't going to be able to count on lottery luck to deliver them these franchise-altering, generational talents, then they have to figure out how to shut them down, because the other teams do have them. And if Bedard, who is the generational talent of this year's draft, is saying that Danielson guy is really hard to play against, then the Red Wings are probably smart to pick him up. Yeah. He's right-handed centerman. He's got good size. He's got some good skill. He was basically in on everything the Wheat Kings did this year in the WHL. So I think that there's a pretty good chance that I will be singing a different tune next year. But right now, I don't know. I definitely think there were more talented players on the board, but it is what it is. They did get a good prospect here in Danielson.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked Danielson throughout the year. He's probably the most complete center in the draft, and really good two-way guy. And I think he could end up being same type of development as Bo Horvat, where he started on the fourth line really early in his career and just moved up from there because he was good defensively. Coaches could trust him in that role. And I think Danielson will have that same. I don't know if the Red Wings will develop him that way and bring him in like that, but I think he could definitely be in the NHL sooner than some of the other guys, which may have been a draw for drafting him, because he could be further along coming into the NHL than some other guys. But overall, I like the pick, maybe a little high. I mean, I would have said that about the Canucks picking him at 11th. I think Danielson going in around the 15-ish mark would be probably more, but I mean, again, that two-way game, and that's I think that's what draws a lot of teams to him. So yeah, I like the pick, but I do agree with you. It's maybe a little high on that.
Two more things real quick. One, speaking of going high, and maybe this is kind of already sneaking into the next guy, but if Danielson was the pick at 17, I would have loved the pick. Like, yeah. that's great value at Danielson. And then the guy that got at 17, if he would have been the 9th pick, I would have appreciated it as a swing more than I appreciate it with Danielson at 9.
Yeah.
Anyways, the other thing I want to say too is that Danielson was a co-captain of the Wheat Kings this year as an 18-year-old. You know anything about me and my prospects and all the good stuff. I love it when kids are wearing letters on their jerseys. So that's a guy that you know is going to bring some high character to the Red Wings locker room when he does arrive. You won't have to worry about him, you know, being immature or anything like that. So that's certainly a draw too.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what Steve Yzerman was looking at too. We all know his leadership, right? So there you go. Okay, let's jump to 17. We alluded to him. Axel Sandin Pellikka. I did not think he was going to be available at 17. We didn't even talk about him at 17.
Nope.
We talked about the Launder at 17, and he went to the Canucks at 11. So Axel Sandin Pellikka going, way lower, but this is awesome for the Red Wings getting this guy. I've talked about him at length throughout with Prospect Corner. He's probably the best offensive defenseman in the first round that was drafted. Obviously still needs to work on his defensive game and probably one of the better transition defensemen as well. What a great pick. Right-handed D as well. Red Wings, we've talked at length about the need for that in the system. So what do you think about Axel Sandin Pellikka going to the Red Wings at 17?
First off, shout out to you and your pick at 11th overall in our mock draft. Nailed it. Good job. Second, I have a lot of thoughts about this. This is my favorite pick out of their draft class. And it's partially because of how they got pick 17 in the first place, right? They traded Philip Hronek, a very offensive-minded defenseman who had his limitations in the defensive zone, but was a nice young player that could have been a building block for the Red Wings for, a period of time, and that's what the Canucks acquired him to be.
Yeah.
Well, guess what they got with the 17th pick? A offensive-minded defenseman that is young, can move the puck well, has some issues in the defensive end, but could work them out over time. He's got runway to work on it, right? They basically replaced Hronek with a player who could be a Hronek or maybe even better. Not bad at all. Sandin Pellikka, like I said just a little bit ago, he wouldn't have been my favorite pick at 9. I would have definitely thought it was a bit of a reach, but I would have appreciated it as a swing. He has that kind of upside. At 17, out of the park. Fantastic. That is more or less why he's my favorite pick here, is because he probably shouldn't have been on the board at 17. And for both the Danielson pick and the Sandin Pellikka pick, Yzerman was pretty quick to stand up once it was the Red Wings' turn to pick. I don't blame him for this pick. He's still on the board. Red Wings are up. Swedish offensive defenseman. Yeah, let's go make the pick, boys. We know what we're doing, right? He adds a lot to their prospect pool they don't have already, and that's crazy because half of the Red Wings prospect pool is defensemen. If not, it's like two-thirds of their prospect pool is defensemen. It's that deep. But they don't have anyone like Sandin Pellikka in there. He is smaller, 5'11". I'm shorter than that, so calling that small hurts. But but he's really high octane offense, right? He moves the puck really well. You can make an argument that he's the best puck mover in this draft, probably outside of Bedard, especially on the blue line, right? And he's got the upside to be like a real power top unit power play quarterback, and a real force in the top 4, especially knowing that you've got Seider and Edvinsson there already too, right? He doesn't have to be a superstar because you've got those two to insulate him. But boy, would it be great if he does become a superstar. I think that the Danielson pick will work out well for them in time. He'll be a good player for them. But man, I think that they got a slam dunk with Axel Sandin Pellikka at 17. I think that if I were to place a bet right now on who the best player out of this draft class will be, it's going to be him. I'm very excited for him to be a Red Wing.
Yeah, guys like Simashev going super high, I think that really shook up the defense type board. And of course, the Canucks picking Villander and then Sandin Pellikka dropping. It was interesting where all those guys kind of slotted in. And like I said, I didn't expect Sandin Pellikka to be around where the Red Wings, for 9, yes, obviously, but for 17, no way. So I mean, what a great pick. I mean, I say I agree. Slam dunk, home run, whatever you want, whatever sports metaphor you want to use. There you go. Okay, well, let's jump to the 2nd to 7th rounds. We won't go through every name. You can read Devin's piece diving into each pick. It was out this morning, I believe it was. So, well, when we're recording this, that is. But give a search on the Red Wings page, you'll find it. I'll also throw a link into the description, so take a look. Let's talk about some notable names, takeaways, whatever you want to do on the Red Wings draft and these picks. So I'll just run through them quickly. So the 2nd round, they have Trey Augustine, Andrew Gibson, and Brady Cleveland. They did trade back, like we said at the beginning, to get the 47th pick, traded their 43rd. So they didn't hit those 3 straight, but 2 straight. Then they draw Noah Dower-Nielsen, which we've talked about as the target, that they were probably going to get him. In round 3, round 4, Larry Keenan. Round 5, Jack Fillon, Kevin Bicker. Round 6, Rudy Guimond, and then 7th round, Emmett Finney. So there's all the picks. Devin, what do you think about this class? Any names you kind of want to point out and throw some takeaways here?
I feel like I have to start with the quick ones here because there's one I really want to focus in on. Noah Dower-Nielsen, great story. Liam, his brother, is already a Red Wings prospect. I'm sure you already knew that by now. That the Red Wings posted that picture of them giving each other a hug and all that good stuff. I like Noah Dower-Nielsen a lot. I think that the Red Wings needed to get a scorer in this draft. They probably should have focused on that a little bit higher than the 3rd round, but I digress. Noah Dower-Nielsen has potential to be a middle 6 scorer, kind of in the same vein as Dominic Kubalik, a little bit different player, but type of player that you can count on to be to provide 20, 25 goals at his peak, assuming he pans out. And I do like that bet on him in the 3rd round. Brady Cleveland, a little high for my blood, but I do like his potential as a potential bully on the blue line in the future. Red Wings don't have, speaking of not having stuff in the prospect pool, they don't really have anybody like that. Cleveland definitely could be that type of player. Fingers crossed that he becomes something, because I do think that was a bit high for him. Kind of makes me think of Maverick Lamoureux in last year's draft. Lamoureux was drafted a lot higher than Cleveland, so I'll digress on that point. But let's talk about their first 2nd round pick. At 41st overall, they took Trey Augustine, as you said, Matt. Now, what's notable about Augustine? He's a goalie. If you are plugged into the Red Wings even just a little bit, you know that they already have a pretty notable goaltending prospect by the name of Sebastian Cossa, drafted in the 1st round just 2 years ago. I think this is one of my top 3 picks. This is my 3rd favorite pick. And the reason why is because I think Augustine's a really good goaltending prospect. I think you could make the argument that he is the best goaltending prospect in this class. Or if he's not, he is definitely one of them. And also he's committed to play at Michigan State, so he's going to be an hour away from Detroit. Red Wings can keep very close eye on him. So that's cool. But this also is kind of an insurance policy, right? Cossa, we're still talking about Cossa versus Wallstead. Cossa hasn't done enough to kind of quell that conversation, silence that conversation. And he still finished the season fine in the ECHL, right? We're all expecting him to be a consistent player in the AHL next season, and we still have hope that he's going to be a good goaltender in the NHL. But there's still enough doubt that, like, it is, at least in my opinion, I thought it was silly to still have all their eggs in that basket. It's, what if he doesn't pan out? He hasn't done anything to suggest he's a slam dunk yet. So getting Augustine it's another bet. It's not, their eggs aren't in one basket. They're in a couple now. I think that this also is will be a motivating factor for Cossa, especially in training camp, right? Or at the Traverse City tournament. I assume they'll both be there. Cossa kind of had that title of goaltender of the future all to himself for the last 2 years. Now they have this kid Augustine in there who's going to be breathing down his neck. He's a good goaltender. They picked him early in the 2nd round for a reason. I think that best case scenario now with these two, is that you can go into the future with a tandem of Kosa and Augustine, and that would be fantastic. And if one of them emerges as like a pure, real number one goaltender, then you can make a move. But like I said, this all comes down to them not having all of their eggs in one basket. I think that's incredibly important, especially given what Kosa has and hasn't shown yet. But I would also be willing to hear an argument that this is maybe a sign that the Red Wings are not as convinced of the Kosa pick, which maybe hurts a little bit given that they used a first round pick on him. But I digress. Just really, really interesting to see them take a goalie that high. And then they also took another goalie in the 6th round, Gumand. This kind of shows that they're filling out their depth chart in this draft, at just about every position, even goaltending. Love the Augustine pick. And if all goes well, he's going to be a factor, whether it's in the development of Kosa or, as a Red Wing in the future.
Yeah, Augustine is I think, I mentioned him as my favorite goalie and the top goalie in this class. And Peter had him 32nd in his rankings, his final rankings, and that's a first round pick. So, I mean, him going 10 picks, no, not 10 picks.
9.
My gosh, my math, 9 picks. 9 picks later. I'm a writer, not a mathematician. 9 picks later. That's pretty great. And the thing is Augustine, I think he has the potential of being a starting goalie. And it'd be great to have a 1A, 1B with Kosa and Augustine. That's your ideal scenario. Them pushing each other. And then eventually one of them gets traded for something crazy. So, I mean, that could potentially happen when you have 2 great goalies. And it's never a bad thing to have goalies in your system, because we all know how long some of these guys take to develop, and one could take longer than the other. And then, you hope that both don't take a long time to develop, and then you're kind of keep waiting on them. But, Kosa, we've talked about, showed strides this season, and we'll see how Augustine does in the system. But yeah, I do agree. It's a good motivator for Kosa, good motivator for Augustine, because he knows that guy's there. So he's going to be pushing hard to get to his level as well. So yeah, I think it's great all around. Picking Augustine, I didn't expect them to pick a goalie that high, but why not? I mean, this guy's going to be a legit, probably going to be, when I redo that prospect goaltenders ranking, he's probably going to be on there. So there you go. We'll see how he does in this season to kind of solidify that. But okay, but yeah, for me, I like those 2 picks that you said, Noah Danielson. I'll throw in Larry Keenan. He has some intriguing potential, some good NHL pedigree. His grandfather played in the NHL a long time ago, but he could potentially be someone, 4th round pick. And any of these guys that are drafted later on, we'll see how it kind of goes in this next season. But I think the Red Wings overall, like you said, added some good pieces to fill some needs. And some skills, some swings. And I think ultimately this draft's going to be another good one for Yzerman. He hasn't had a bad one yet, so I don't think it's going to start now. All right, well, first off the rush, and I'll ask you, Devin, who out of this class, and it probably isn't an obvious answer, but who's going to be the biggest star in the NHL from this class? And we'll say the whole class, because you never know.
Talking about the Red Wings class, right?
Yeah,
or the
yeah. The whole, like the Red Wings class. Yeah.
It's like Connor Bedard.
But yeah, that's
I'm going with Sandin Pellikka. Like I said, right now I have Pellikka above Danielson. Kind of is what it is. I think Pellikka has in that article I mentioned that Pellikka has the potential to be what Red Wings fans wanted Quinn Hughes to be back in the 2018 draft. And obviously we all know how Quinn Hughes has developed with the Canucks. So if Pellikka can become that type of player, boy, that's gonna be a lot of fun.
That definitely has the potential to do that. And that's why I think ultimately the Canucks didn't pick him, because he's so much like Quinn Hughes that Villander just fits a bit more. That he's a two-way guy the Canucks don't have. So yeah, Pellikka is definitely going to be I agree. I'll pick him too. He's going to be a star, but Danielson's going to be the best two-way guy that I think he'll end up being in the NHL first over Pellikka.
I agree with that.
But star power, Pellikka definitely. All right. Well, before we move on to our free agency primer, which will be very the shelf life on this will be very short, but we'll do it. Before we get there, here's a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, we're back. Let's talk free agency, which is, again, like I said, starting in a few hours, or it could be already started. If you're watching this later in the evening, you may know who the Red Wings have signed, what guys are off the board. We may be talking about guys that are already signed somewhere else. But let's talk about some names to watch. And a few were added to the list in the last, day or so. Blake Wheeler and Matt Duchene. And Matt Duchene is now, according to our top UFAs on the Hockey Writers, is the top UFA available. And Blake Wheeler was bought up by the Winnipeg Jets, which seemed to be coming down the pipe last few weeks or a week or so here. So those two guys are now added to the pool. Do you have any names that you think the Red Wings should be targeting? Like I said, some of these may be already signed by the time you watch, but what do you think?
Boy, I think Matt Duchene would be a lot of fun to add. I mean, whoever signs him is going to get a good player. I'm actually kind of surprised that Nashville did that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember who it was, but I saw somebody say, wouldn't it have made more sense to trade Duchene at 50% and then buy out Johansson instead of the other way around?
Mm-hmm.
I would have gotten actually something out of Duchene, but whatever. Anyways, I don't know if Red Wings are actually going to get him. I just don't think they necessarily have. I mean, they have the spot for him, but depending on what he's going to ask, I don't think it makes sense for Red Wings to commit that to a 32-year-old. But who knows? Yeah. A player. I'm going to have a couple players to throw out here. One I've been kind of like mentioning here and there as like a if and maybe, but now that they haven't acquired Alex DeBrincat and it doesn't sound like they're like super close on anything else when it comes to trades, might as well throw them out there again. The Red Wings have some Blues on their teams, and so maybe they might have some pull with Vladimir Tarasenko. They need a goal scorer. Tarasenko's kind of known for doing that. He'd be an interesting add, especially if they're able to get him on a decent contract, whether he's expected to be with the team long term or ends up being a trade piece down the line, whatever. He would definitely add some goals to their lineup. And like I said, there's some familiar faces there on the team that could maybe persuade him to come to Detroit. Couple others I want to throw out. It sounds like Alex Killorn is very much on the Red Wings radar. Makes sense. Yzerman's familiar with him, given his time in Tampa Bay. I think Killorn would be a good add in terms of veteran leadership and even playing and bringing like championship experience to the team, right? Can't have enough of that, especially for a young team. And he'll play, I imagine he'll play a role similar to what Tyler Bertuzzi was playing. He'll kind of bring a line together. So if he hits free agency, I wouldn't be surprised to see that move happen. And then one other guy I want to throw out has got to be Radko Gudas. Mentioned him already. Might as well bring him up again. We talk about how the Red Wings need to be more physical. Gudas would certainly bring that. He's a right-handed defenseman. As much as they did draft Axel Sandin Pellikka, he's not ready to go. So they still have that hole to fill on their current roster. Gudas would be a good fit for that, I believe. And then it is worth it to look in on some of these guys that weren't qualified. One name that I'm actually kind of interested in, and I know it might sound nuts, is Nolan Patrick. who was not qualified by the Golden Knights, I'm pretty sure it was.
Mhm.
Second overall pick in 2017 and has not panned out, mostly because he can't stay healthy. And that's why it's kind of silly of me to suggest it, because he can't stay healthy. But if he can, if he has a clean bill of health, I think he's somebody worth rolling the dice on, because he's picked second overall for a reason. And he's not going to ask for a huge contract. He's probably not even going to get a lengthy contract. You're probably going to, if he does get a contract, it'll probably be a 1 year, maybe even league minimum deal, because he hasn't played. So I'd be interested in taking a chance on a player's upside like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Patrick. Patrick just happens to be a good example of it. So I don't know. I'd be combing through. There's some obvious names out there like Tarasenko that they could target, but kind of like Suter a couple of years ago when they brought him on, and even Kubalik last year. There's going to be some sneaky guys that teams kind of gave up on that could maybe find new life in Detroit. So I'd be looking for those.
Yeah, I agree on the Killorn one. It seems like Tampa Bay won't be able to re-sign him. Sounds like he's hitting the market. So, I mean, Tampa Bay may end up doing it. We'll see. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting one, especially the connection with Yzerman there. Daniel Sprong is another guy that was not qualified by the Seattle Kraken. And again, they may re-sign him. It just ended up being their qualifying offer was maybe too high for them. So they maybe negotiate a better deal in free agency. There's some factors there. It's happened before where it's like, why wasn't this guy qualified? Well, then they just sign him like the next day. So I was like, okay. But yeah, Sprong had 21 goals this past season, and he'd be an interesting ad. Another guy, like I'd probably stay away from the Blake Wheelers and guys like that. Duchesne would be an interesting one, but I don't know how much he's going to want, what type of deal he'll want. I mean, usually buyouts, they take lesser because they're already getting paid by the team that bought him out, but he'd be interesting. And just one more for me, I think a guy like bringing back maybe a Thomas Tatar. I mean, he was pretty good for the Red Wings not that long ago. And he's been pretty good. He had 20 goals this past season for the Devils. And it's interesting why they didn't bring him back. Or, I mean, again, some of these guys may be signed by the teams that have not. But yeah, I think he'd be an interesting too. But, there's some few interesting names out there that, like I say, there's some guys that are going to get overpaid because like Michael Bunting, and I wouldn't even swing on him because he's going to want a lot of money. But it's been interesting to see who signs with the Red Wings. Like we didn't anticipate any of the signings that they did last season. I don't think we said Perron was going to come to the Red Wings or a guy like, Andrew Kopp. I mean, Yzerman was very busy free agency last offseason. So we'll see what he has up his sleeve this time around. All right, next question. And this won't die really quick. What do you think the Red Wings will need to accomplish this offseason? Not just on first day of free agency, but just in general, free agents, trades, whatever. What do you think Yzerman should have on his to-do list before the season starts?
So besides add goal scoring and toughness, because we've already kind of touched on that, they got to get a goalie. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of goalie they do get. Do they get like a true backup and kind of hand Husso the reins and let him be the true starter? Or do they get somebody who can push him for starts the way that we kind of expected Nedeljkovic to do this past season? I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. There are some good goalies out there that will be available. And depending on which one they get, we'll kind of know what the plan is for Red Wings goaltending this coming season. Other things that they need to accomplish, I think that they need to fill out their roster with what they need, but they also need to not. I think they need to avoid going on a huge spending spree like they did last year. They need to spend money to reach the cap floor. We've talked about that before on the show. But I also firmly believe, especially now that they've added 11 more prospects to the pool, that they need to have room for some of these kids to actually play and have a chance to play in Detroit. If they're signing 2 or 3 defensemen over the next week or so, I don't know how Edvinson plays in Detroit,
Yeah.
in which case, what's the point? If they sign a bunch of forwards, Marco Kasper's probably in Grand Rapids. I'm not saying that's a bad thing because he's only played one game in Detroit. That's nothing to go off of. But you want him to at least have a chance to play in Detroit, right? If he's ready for it. Same thing with Carter Mazer. We talked about him. I last year when he went on that spending spree, my instant gut reaction was, I mean, yeah, this is great, but I thought they were going to let the kids play. And over the course of the year, the kids got to play. Berggren ended up joining the lineup. Edvinson played late, but they didn't have that youth infusion the same way they did a couple of years ago when Zator and Raymond joined the team. They need to have another year like when they had Zator and Raymond join the team, where they have at least two kids come onto the team and play a big role. I think that this team is going to take steps forward because of their kids, not because of the veterans they can bring in free agency and trades. I'm all about bringing in an Alex DeBrincat or whoever, somebody like that. But again, I still think that the growth this team needs to have is going to come from the kids in their prospect pool. And that growth isn't going to happen if they aren't on the roster. They don't have an opportunity to be on the roster. So absolutely go fill out the holes you need to fill out, but also don't get crazy. Leave some room. Edvinson's ready to go. Johansson's probably ready to go. William Wallender's going to be pushing. Carter Mazer might be ready to go. Marco Kasper might be ready to go. Freaking Nate Danielson could very well push hard, right? Axel Sandin Pellikka is going to look good. There's a bunch of names I'm not even thinking of right now that will look good in the fall because they're going to have all summer to train and think about making the Red Wings roster. Let these kids have a chance to make the roster. That's what rebuilds do. That's what the point of a rebuild is. So what do they need to accomplish? They need to make a better roster, but also allow their kids to be a reason that their roster is better.
Yeah. Elmer Soderblom, another guy. Great first bit of the season, and he'd probably be a full-time. Unfortunately got injured there and then went back to Grand Rapids. But yeah, he's another guy. I mean, there's so many, and you need, like you say, you need to have space for them. You can't be blocking them with veterans and on contracts. I mean, Yzerman hasn't thrown out big contracts to these free agents. It's not like he's throwing out 8-year deals or 7-year deals. They're like 3-4-year deals. So but those are still significant. I mean, especially if a guy's ready to go and now you're saying, you're 2-3 years now to come. So
Sherratt's not going anywhere, and he's got 3 more years, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's not getting traded. I don't think anyone's going to want to take him on. But yeah, you can't be blocking them from making the NHL or even having a chance at it too. So, okay, our final off the rush, and this is a little, maybe not off topic, but this is about an acquisition that the Red Wings just got. Klim Kostin. What do you think about him coming in? I mean, they did get Kailer Yamamoto, but they bought him out really quick right after that. So he's a free agent. But Klim Kostin is on the roster. So what do you think about him? Another St. Louis Blue. Former St. Louis Blue.
They're collecting those guys like the Pokemon cards, right?
Yeah, right.
Glad you brought him up because I definitely kind of slipped my mind talking about them adding toughness. Well, that's kind of Kostin's MO there. He's got some Tom Wilson in the game. I do think they're going to sign him. I'm not sure what the terms are going to be, but I do think that they got him with the intention of, keeping him around. And I think he's another, case in point that they don't need to go, adding a bunch of dudes in free agency. They needed to add toughness. Well, that's what Kostin can provide. And he's going to take up a roster spot, right? So how many more roster spots do you have before it's like a given that the Kaspers and Mazers will not be in Detroit next year, at least to start? But I mean, I like it, especially you got him for literally nothing. Like future considerations, that means nothing. So rolling the dice, talking about some of these young guys that just need a chance, rolling the dice on them. That's what they're doing with Kostin, and I like it. And I think that he definitely adds an element that their lineup needed.
Yeah, and it's a very Yzerman pickup, I think, too. A guy that's underrated, and he was really good in Edmonton. I'm actually surprised they didn't push harder for keeping him, but they need cap space, so they couldn't sign him to a deal and he was really good in their bottom six. And like you said, the physicality, the pushback that he provided for the Oilers, he's going to be a really good addition to the bottom of the lineup. So yeah, very excited to see that. Yamamoto, I would have liked that the Yzerman kept him too, but again, they could sign him again. It's just that contract that he was under was not good. So, so apparently they did try to keep him. The numbers didn't work out. So they may revisit that. We'll see.
I will say I was a little surprised because it's not like the Red Wings are hurting for cap space. So even if Yamamoto was a little overcompensated, like,
yeah, I don't know.
they had the room for it, right? Like,
I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah, but we'll see. We'll see if that. I mean, 3.1 million is a little bit, but again, the Red Wings had the cap space, but there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know
for sure.
Okay. Well, I mean, draft, free agency, and now everyone's kind of focused on the free agency now. Draft is in the rear view. Off season is now fully in gear, and we'll be talking free agency next episode. Who the Red Wings signed? Who the Red Wings signed, picked up, and how they fit into the team. That's what we'll be talking about in the next episode, and hopefully there's gonna be some guys that we can talk about. that Yzerman didn't do anything, but we'll also
he
talk
heard
about
he heard my spiel about leaving spots open for the kids, and he was like, you know what, good point, I'm not going to sign anybody.
Well, we'll talk about that anyway, even if he's not do anything. But keep an eye out thehockeywriters.com for any breaking news that will happen at free agency. We'll be throwing out articles as the signings happen, so if you need to know, we'll have something for you. And then, of course, the Red Wings team will also have articles on the free agents that they do sign, analysis of how they fit into the team. So keep an eye on the HockeyWriters.com YouTube channel, as well as we keep rolling out the shows throughout the offseason. And follow us on Twitter at THW Grindline as well. And keep those comments coming in the comment section. We'll return to Comment Corner next week as well. So, stay tuned. We'll be here for you for another episode of The Grind Line.